Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Izuku Unleashed and Unhinged. This will be Part 4, Chapters 6 and 7. Chapter 6. When you get a new boss, a grandchild, and a headache all before 8 a.m. Shota sat in the meeting room Nezu had called them to hours before the start of the first day of classes, dreading what the creature could possibly need them for. Usually any updates were sent via email, so him gathering them in person did not bode well for his sanity. Nezu stood on the table and grinned at them, sending chills down every spine in the room. I'm pleased to announce that the position of vice principal has finally been filled. Now, the vice principal is a bit on the young side, but let me assure you that he is tested out of high school and most of his college classes. Until he finishes his degree, the position is considered probationary, but he has all the authority of a full VP, and I expect you all to treat him with respect. The still grinning rodent pulled out a remote from his pocket and pressed a button to open the doors. Every head turned to look as the new vice principal entered, and Shota felt his soul leave his body. Walking into the room was Shadow in full vigilante costume with a tie added around his neck, poorly tied, and a shiny gold name tag pinned to his chest declaring him Mr. Vice Principal. As he entered the room, Gives You Hell started playing from the announcement sound system speakers lining the walls, and Shota knew in that moment who had been trying to force a mental breakdown on him. Shadow's eyes roamed over the gathered teachers before settling on Shota, full of evil and mischief. The music stopped, and he addressed the room. Hello, everyone. I'm Shadow, your new vice principal. Since I'm new to my position, Nezu has kindly let me hire an assistant, so please join me in welcoming the best assistant in the world, Eri. He dramatically swept his arms out as a small girl entered the room, dressed in a full suit, tie much better done than Shadow's. Her white hair was pulled back into a high ponytail. She had dark sunglasses typically seen in spy movies over her eyes, and a name tag exactly like Shadow's except it read, Assistant to Mr. Vice Principal / Queen of the World. Eri stood slightly behind Shadow, and the vigilante put a hand on her head. Eri is also the granddaughter of our very own Eraserhead and present Mike. Say hello to your grandpas, Eri. She sent them a small wave before letting out a quiet, Hello, grandpas. Every staff member was blatantly staring at the two pro-heroes. Shota spoke since Hizashi was too busy trying to catch flies with his mouth. While it is nice to meet you, Eri, he glared at Shadow. We don't have any grandchildren. Shadow rolled his eyes. So you're the one that taught Hitoshi it's okay to abandon your kids. He waved his hand dismissively. Don't worry, he only objected to being dad for like a second before he fell in love with our daughter. Shota glared at the boy. His head was already throbbing, and he hadn't even stepped foot into the classroom yet. He was about to respond when Eri clutched Shadow's pants leg. Do my grandpas not want me? Are they going to make you send me back? I don't want to go back. A pang went through Shota's chest at the wobbly voice of the admittedly adorable girl, and Hizashi rushed over to crouch in front of the sniveling child. Of course we want you. You just took us by surprise is all. Immediately the sniffling stopped, and the girl smiled at Hizashi. Good. 'Cause Shadowni made the last person who made me sad go away, and I don't want Toshini's dads to go away, or he'll be sad. Toshini should always be happy, 'cause he's so nice. Choosing to ignore that bit of insanity, Shota asked, I thought Hitoshi and Shadow were your dads. Why are you calling them brothers? Eri looked at him like a parent explaining something to a particularly dim child. They aren't my real dads. They're just my dads until Shadowni finds me good parents. So, really they're my brothers. She leaned forward to loudly whisper, Shadowni likes to call himself my dad to freak people out. Nezu clapped his paws together. Now that we are all acquainted, let us go over some rules. Hizashi returned to his seat, and Shadow, followed by his assistant, went to stand beside Nezu. Firstly, a condition of his employment was that no one try to uncover his identity. Anyone who does attempt to do so will find themselves without a job. Shadow will reveal himself if and when he chooses to do so. Several people shifted nervously. Nezu didn't make threats lightly, and no one with a brain wanted to be on his bad side. Second, no one may touch Eri without her express permission. Should you see any student attempt to touch her, you will be expected to intervene. People often forget themselves around young children. We do not need anyone being the victim of an unfortunate quirk accident, because they startled the girl. Shota was studying the girl now. If her quirk was powerful enough for Nezu to be warning them about startling her, it was something to keep an eye on. Another condition of employment was quirk training for Eri from our staff here. You will all be receiving your schedules for these sessions if I have chosen you to be one of her teachers. Nezu grinned again, something threatening flashing in his eyes. Lastly, in my absence, Shadow will have the full authority of the principal of UA, and I expect you all to follow his orders as you would mine. The meeting ended, and after polite introductions, Shota stood alone with the new vice principal and his assistant. Crossing his arms, Shota stared at the teenager. "Do you want to tell me why you've been pranking me like we're frat brothers?" Shadow was smirking under his mask. He could just tell. "Not really, Dad." Then the boy sauntered out of the room with a small girl following behind him like the world's smallest bodyguard. Shota rubbed his temple. This was going to be a long school year. Chapter 7. Vice Principal of Chaos. Izuku was enjoying his first day as vice principal. He'd gotten to mess with Aizawa bright and early, and Eri looked absolutely adorable in her tiny business suit. Aizawa now knew Shadow had been the one pulling pranks on him, so Izuku didn't have to cover his tracks anymore. Plus, since he had to stop his vigilante work as part of his deal with Nezu, he had a lot more time to plot against the man. The deal they'd made was pretty straightforward. He would get a degree to become qualified for vice principal position, stop being a vigilante, and be Nezu's personal hero intern to get the experience required to take the hero license exam without being a hero course student. The job as vice principal doubled as part of his hero internship. Izuku was learning to manage PR, form connections in the hero world, and handling complaints from students and staff members that would teach valuable conflict resolution skills. There were also the secret manipulation and analysis classes Nezu would be giving him. Izuku would get internships and work studies with other heroes that were more combative later to ensure he learned everything he needed to without ever being in traditional hero classes. On top of more time to scheme against Eraserhead, he was getting Eri the socialization she needed in a safe environment. Plus, they could have a lot of fun along the way. Nezu introduced him to the students at the orientation assembly. The principal called his name and Izuku rollerbladed onto the stage, while Eye of the Tiger played at full volume and lights flashed wildly in every color. He'd pulled a shirt on over his hoodie that had a picture of Nezu with the words, "All Hail the Rat God," in bright red above his head. Right as he reached the microphone, the lights and music stopped, and he addressed the new minions. "Hello, I'm Shadow, but you may also refer to me as Mr. Vice Principal or High Priest of the Rat God." The students shifted nervously, and whispers broke out from the crowd. Izuku ignored it and turned to sweep out one arm. "This is Eri, my personal assistant." Eri, still in her suit and sunglasses, walked onto the stage to stand beside him. "Eri is under my protection and does not like to be touched. If you feel the need to touch her without permission, remember what I did to Shigaraki when he kidnapped my boyfriend. I'll be less forgiving when it comes to her." The room was dead silent when he paused. The video of Shigaraki being captured by heroes, handless and ranting about Shadow, was playing in their minds after his words. He gave them a second to digest that before finishing up. "If you avoid making her uncomfortable, then we shall get along swimmingly. I want to assure every student that if you have any problems at school or in your personal life, you're free to come to me and I will believe you. Every step will be taken to ensure your safety and happiness. I'll only involve Nezu or your teachers if absolutely necessary. Now, I believe Eri had a few words." The girl took the offered microphone. "Shadow saved me, and I know if you need help, he'll save you too, because he's a hero and that's what heroes do. He also accepts bribes in the form of candy that can be paid to me. Thank you." There was scattered applause as they left the stage, and Nezu ended the assembly. Students filtered out to make their way back to classrooms so they could end the short day they got for the first day of school. Izuku waited outside the 2A classroom with Eri, teaching her the newest TikTok dance he'd learned until Hitoshi was ready to leave. When the doors opened, Ida was the first student to walk out. He frowned and approached the vigilante. "I understand that you are a new vice principal, but I don't think it's entirely proper to be asked to be called high priest or to have a child assistant." His eyes flicked down to Izuku's shirt. "Your wardrobe is especially inappropriate for a person in your position." Izuku turned to his assistant. "Eri, are we taking criticism today?" Eri pulled the planner she had spent her time during the assembly doodling cats and turtles in out of her pocket and pretended to check his schedule. "I don't see any criticism appointments, and you don't have any openings for another week." "Damn! Tough luck, I'm booked and busy." He slapped Ida's arm lightly and walked around him to the boy standing in the middle of the remainder of his class that had gathered to watch the show. "Toshi, my love, you always look so dashing in your uniform." He ran a hand down Hitoshi's arm. "Let's go somewhere I can rip it off you." His boyfriend laughed as Izuku grabbed his wrist to lead him down the hall, Eri following along and chatting at Hitoshi about her new job. Several members of Class A were giggling at Ida's stunned face as the trio disappeared down the hall. Day 2 on the job was spent going through student files and their classwork from the previous year to make sure everyone was getting the support they needed to thrive. Izuku managed to find multiple students that needed accommodations for learning disabilities previously overlooked and a list of others to hand to Recovery Girl to get tested for suspected issues. If Kaminari didn't have undiagnosed ADHD, Izuku was a purple seagull. Eri spent this time at her desk coloring in a book of heroes, purposefully coloring their suits the wrong colors and adding skirts to most of them. His office was large enough for 2 desks and a little sitting area containing a couch, 2 armchairs, and a coffee table. It was made cozy by the bookshelves lining the walls, the play tea set Nezu had gifted Eri after she fell in love with their tea parties, and the stuffed animals the girl had arranged on the couch. During lunch, Hitoshi joined them in the office to eat together. He oohed and awed over Eri's art and let her serve him pretend tea. Izuku watched his boyfriend interact with Eri with hearts in his eyes. He was going to marry the shit out of that boy one day. After Hitoshi had returned to class, Nezu joined him to give him his lessons on manipulation and analysis. Learning from Nezu was the most challenged Izuku had ever felt academically. He figured they could have the world dominated within a week if they wanted. Plus, the Chimera let Eri pet his fur when there was no one else there to see, so he was basically Izuku's favorite person. In his downtime, he had taken to going through security footage for the past few years. He was running it through facial recognition software, so he only had to look through clips that had Aizawa in them. Then he just had to find any embarrassing footage. The students weren't expecting daily mass text titled Wild Eraserhead Sightings, but there were no complaints after the first, where Eraserhead, clearly sleep-deprived, tripped and landed in a trash can. The students only kept their giggles contained around Aizawa for a day before he caught on and harassed Hitoshi into showing him the one that was sent that day. It was him spilling his coffee in the hall before class and deciding to just lay down next to the liquid in the fetal position. The underground hero stormed into his office while Izuku was in the middle of creating posters to hang up in the halls. "I know you sent those texts. Knock it off." Izuku leaned back in his desk chair, putting his feet up on his desk. "I'd hope you know it was me. I signed them, after all." Aizawa sat in one of the chairs in front of Izuku's desk. "I don't know why you're upset with me, but you're undermining the respect the students have for me, and it needs to stop." "No, I'm undermining their belief that you are a scary badass that never makes mistakes." Izuku waved his hand dismissively. "You should be thanking me. I'm making you more approachable. Your students will feel more comfortable coming to you with issues if they aren't terrified of you." The teacher studied him for a moment before it seemed to dawn on him that he wouldn't win this fight. "Fine. Let's go over the accommodations you sent me for Ashido and Kaminari's ADHD." They had a very productive discussion about teaching people with learning difficulties. Then Aizawa left, and Izuku got back to work on his posters. The next day, when he saw the posters announcing meetings of the Rat God Congregation, Aizawa just sighed and kept walking. He learned very quickly about picking his battles when it came to dealing with Shadow. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 7 of Izuku Unleashed and Unhinged. Chapter 8 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying this one, and as always, thank you so much for listening.